It's funny. As you're talking, I'm looking at some of the Wikipedia stuff on this, and I might have read Robert Venditti stuff. I might not have. I really don't know. Um, the publication history says it ran from 2005 to 2006. Um, Venditti was inspired to write the Surrogates after reading Indra Sinha's book, The Cyber Gypsies, about numerous individuals who lost their spouses or their jobs due to their addiction to the internet and their online personas. In an interview, he said, "It dawned on me that if you were to somehow able to create a persona and send it out into the real world where it could go to work for you and run your errands and so on, then you would never have to go back to being yourself." And yeah, I have a lot to say about that. Critical reception. Although it received good reviews, the initial miniseries debuted with low sales numbers. This is what I was alluding to before. The second issue sold less than 2,000 copies and was the 29th best-selling comic book in October of 2005. The book attracted more attention after the film adaptation was announced. So the plot synopsis goes like this. In the year 2054, people live through surrogates, life like androids they control from the safety of home. Society has become sanitized, remote, and heavily reliant on these perfect avatars. Detective Harvey Greer is investigating a series of surrogate-related attacks, including sabotage and destruction. The suspect is a mysterious figure named Steeplejack, who rejects surrogate culture and wants people to live authentically. He sounds like my avatar. As Greer digs deeper, he becomes disillusioned with the system and eventually gives up his own surrogate, choosing to reconnect with the world in his flawed human form. So what did you think of the book, Evan?
I really liked it. One of the things that jumped out to me about it, besides just the fact that the themes are, I mean, it does a great job of having themes that are obvious, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean it like instantly, as soon as you're reading, you're like, oh, okay, I see where this is going. I can relate to this, and then explores them terrifically. But one thing I liked is there was no like info dump. There was no like the year is 2054. We didn't get a synopsis.
The Decepticons have taken over Cybertron. Yeah. Literally how the movie starts.
We didn't get that. It was just like, hey, this is going on, and almost everything was revealed through dialogue and naturally. Now there was each issue had some back matter, some articles at the end, and I was like, oh no, is this like Watchmen? But it was really it was really informative, and even that wasn't an info dump like the point by point history of surrogacy. It was newspaper articles, magazine articles that like expanded the world. You didn't have to read them to understand the story at all, but it made it really rich and more in depth without ever just saying, okay, in 2037 this happened, in 2038 this happened.
In the trade, ooh, I can do props too.
This really doesn't help the podcast audience.
Thanks, Dick.
I prefer Richard.
In the trade, there's actually supplemental material that speaks to what you're talking about, but in the original floppies, that stuff isn't there, and I absolutely agree with you. It helps the flow of it's good. The difference between writing and good writing is the ability to pepper in the details and world building over the course of the narrative, as opposed to feeding it to you in hard to digest chunks right at the beginning, the middle, and the end for no good reason.
Yeah. No, yeah, I thought that was something that this did very well, aside from the fact that it had a theme. A lot of the stories we've talked about on here, even if we haven't been impressed with the execution of either the comic or the movie or both, we've gone, okay, this is a great idea. The elevator pitch for this is fantastic. And this one is too, okay, that's, 40, well, at that point, 50 years in the future. And, humanity has gone from screen culture to, we don't ever have to interact with each other at all, which is mildly appealing at times. But, then it quickly takes that to the extreme, and it doesn't. There's a lot of stuff in it where it doesn't, just say, oh, well, surrogates are bad. period. It was, okay, here's why we did this. There's an article explaining why surrogates handle law enforcement and this, that, and the other. And, in the movie and the book, there's a character who's very important who developed surrogates because he had, a severe, I don't know if they ever said what it was, but he couldn't walk. He could barely communicate with people. So it's like, okay, here's someone this would actually help. And in a total departure from real life, humanity took technology that was useful and used it for shallow and selfish means.
Since the dawn of the internet, we've had the slowly encroaching avatar, whether it was, a AOL screen name. What was your AOL screen name? Mine was Dude Muda.
I never was on. Never had an AOL.
Okay.
I don't think. My a lot of my usernames and emails are RNMKR47, which I had just read The Rainmaker when I got my first computer with the internet.
Yeah. It's funny to see like people's old email, like their old like Hotmails or Prodigy emails and shit like that, or AOL.
What do you mean old Hotmail? Some people still use an active Hotmail account.
And some people still drive cars from the 70s. Listen, my point is that like I remember like my first getting into the internet, my first way of connecting with the internet was through AOL, and I was a teenager. I think it's like 94. It was, gosh, I could always like relate my online presence to what was going on in wrestling at the time. And so it has to be between like 94 and 97, because I was all over like pro wrestling internet at the time. And at the time was Bret Hart leaving the WWE for WCW and the Montreal Screw Job. And that was fucking everywhere. So yeah, like 96, 97. But like I said, I remember getting online with my dad kind of like helping me with it. And the very first time I'm like in a chat room with somebody, I remember my dad sort of had this look. My dad's a really smart guy. He was in computers. He was at one point working on a master's degree in computer science. And I think he knew. He knew it was a very interesting moment. The moment I had my first chat room experience, he was looking over my shoulder. And I could see it in his face. He didn't say it at the time, but I think he was thinking it. We've lost him. I got my first taste of the drug, and I never looked back. But yeah, I remember like my old screen names were like Dude Muda, because it was the Dude Love, the Great Muda, again, wrestling nerd. And then I think I was Markkind, which was Mankind, again, my name plus Mick Foley's gimmick and all of that. In any case, my point being that avatars have been with us for a really, really long time. First, it's that sort of thing, and then it's online gaming. And I remember I used to watch some documentaries about this. Is where I was going with it. And I remember there was a girl talking about the internet gives you anonymity and infinite creativity to be anything you want to be. Ready Player One dealt with this fictionally, I think, the best way. The idea of our life sucks. And this directly links to the surrogates. Our life sucks. Real life sucks. It's hard. We don't like who we are. We don't like the way we look. We don't like the way we feel. We don't like interacting with the world. So here's this virtual space where everybody can look like whatever it is you want to be. Whatever your wish fulfillment perception is. I want to be Kevin Nash, but not with the bad knees, or I want to be, a character from Final Fantasy, or I want to be Donkey Kong. You can be that now, and you can interact in this world as that thing, as the very thing you've always wanted to be. What an addicting drug that is. What an addictive idea of I can shed my skin and be this otherworldly entity, and I can feel good about myself finally. It is a wonderfully psychologically addictive drug. And that is, to me, the theme, and for me, the underlying attraction of Robert Venditti's The Surrogates. I love the idea of exploring this like psychological effect of like not liking yourself and wanting to be something else and having that ability to now interact in the world as something else. And this idea that he got this idea from another novel, and it's absolutely true. How much time we spend online being something that we're not in a space where we're happier that way than we are in real life. And the constant tug and pull of having to exist in the real world because it's actually healthier than this virtual fictional fantasy space. And the main character, it's really summed up really nicely in the book in the main character's interaction with his wife.
Oh yeah.
Where he's like, can we just spend time together? And she's like, great, let's go out, let's go do whatever. And he's like, no, come out of
the bot.
Yeah, no, come out of your surrogate. Like, I just want to spend time with you, the flesh and blood you. And her argument to him is, why would you want me to feel bad about myself? Why would you want me to exist in this space where I don't like who I am? I'm more comfortable this way. I engage with the world in a happier, more mindful place. Engage with me that way. And he's like, ick, no. No, thank you. I would like the real... It's so funny. I will shut up and let you speak. But
you're good.
I was thinking about this last night. I was at a friend's house, a female friend, my ex-girlfriend, and she stopped dyeing her hair. It's graying. Same thing with my current girlfriend. She has some like gray streaks in her hair. How much more I appreciate the gracefully aging look than the desperately hanging on to youth thing. And I bring that up because that's what this character is doing in the book.
Oh, yeah.
The wife character, she's like, I don't like who I am. I don't like what I'm becoming. I don't like aging. It's a major part of like the current pervasive mental illness of our culture is people desperately clinging to a sense of self that they've long since age past. And, you know, it's the Peter Pan thing. And Bruce Willis is like, but I like my old wife.
This about my Thor poster?
The shoe fits, Cinderella. Now, he says to her, like, but I like you. I like that we're old. I like aging together. Like, why won't you kind of embrace our relationship as it is and not as this fiction you've created? And she's like, who the fuck are you to tell me how to live?
Well, I pulled one of those quotes out in the second issue. She says, when I'm linked, I look younger, I feel younger. And if that's not reality, I don't know what is.
Yeah.
And it's easy to go, well, it's not real because it's not real. But if you're that immersed, if you're feeling what the surrogate is feeling, I mean, I think it talks about like you can smoke and get the feeling of the nicotine or whatever without, you know, any of the cancerous side effects, or, you know, you can do all this stuff, all the benefit, none of the risk. And, you know, obviously that's, you know, not the ideal thing all the time, but you can see how appealing that is. And, you know, that's been the subject of a lot of stories is that's not true. Well, but what if it is? I mean, you know, look at what's his name? Cypher in the Matrix. He's like, you know, I know this isn't a steak, but sure tastes like a steak. So I'm good with it.
A natural course of human psychology reinforced through religious teaching is cause and effect, action, consequence. You remove the consequence from people's lives, you have the modern school system. You have modern spent too long on TikTok yesterday, speaking of avatars. You have wildly dysfunctional behavior. That's the reality of it. If you can constantly touch hot stoves and never get burned, why would you stop touching hot? Wouldn't you do anything? You know, we've seen and you know this because you are a consumer of stories and a teller of stories. You know that there are so many that deal in the idea of what if there are no consequences? What would people do? And they go crazy. They go absolutely fucking insane. And
Groundhog Day. What if there was no tomorrow? We could do anything we want.
Did you watch Legends of Tomorrow?
Yeah, parts of it. I made it through season 3.
Okay, this may have been then after you stopped watching it, but the character who plays one of the Egyptian superheroes, there's a scene
where more than one?
Moon Knight, V for Vendetta, Watchmen. So, speaking of ticks, to get to this point and move this on, they do like every good science fiction series, they do a Groundhog's Day episode.
Oh no, I did see that one. Yeah.
Okay. And when she realizes that she's going to die at the end of every day unless she solves the puzzle, she just starts doing stupid shit like eating whipped cream. Just like playing a trombone, just jerking off through the whole thing until she finally.
Stupid about playing the trombone.
Huh?
Stupid about playing the trombone.
My point being, she isn't focused on the task. She is just reveling in adolescent behavior, essentially. She's just idling the days away, trying to figure out what to do next. And that's what the Surrogates deals with.
That's the only reason I do half the stuff I don't want to do, because I know it's going to be a problem if I don't. Yeah.
I go to work because if I don't, I can't pay for the bills. And if I can't pay for the bills, I can't live in the house. It's really that simple. It's funny. I've been complaining as of late about like, why do I still continue to do all this? Why do I do podcasts or whatever? When I get much more satisfaction and immediate attention out of doing TikTok. And I had to take a breath and go, because I won't be socializing unless I do this. If I don't, this is kind of my social outlet now. Since I don't have a lot of socializing outside of this, and outside of what I do with my girlfriend. So hey, friend, this is my socializing time. It's not really a podcast. It's just me and a friend talking about a book we like.
Okay.
This combines two of my favorite things. It combines hard-boiled detective noir with science fiction. And I think that's why I love it so much. What do you think about that?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, it has all the hallmarks of a murder mystery and your classic sci-fi stuff. Sorry, I lost my train of thought there. But yeah, it definitely presses all those buttons, and it's recognizable in each one, but it doesn't feel like, oh, I've seen this story before, and maybe it's just because it does it so well. I mean, I think this has been touched on in different stories, like you said, Ready Player One, things like that. But at no point was I reading this going, oh, here we go again. Internet's bad. Computer. No, this was I was all in on this.
I think because it takes a moderate tone with the subject matter, it does not. First of all, it doesn't really take a stance. It kind of presents two sides of an argument and lets the reader kind of sort through it. Mm-hmm. And I think it also attends appropriately to the narrative. So this isn't just, you and I have, and Ronnie have two varying opinions on, not all robots, Billionaire Island. What's his name?
Mark Russell.
Yeah. You, me, and Ronnie probably have, like, with me being on one side, Ronnie being on the far other side, and you and Jesse kind of being in the middle on Mark Russell, to one degree or another, of his level of preachiness. Mark Russell is as subtle as John Singleton is as subtle as a kick to the face. And this handles the same degree of thematic intrigue with a lot more subtlety. A lot more, I like Mark Russell, and I think his ideas are grown up, but his presentation is adolescent. Whereas Robert Venditti, at least as far as the Surrogates go, is grown up in both thematic theme and presentation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think both the comic and the movie do come down on, hey, maybe not everything should be done with robots, but it's not like, oh, everybody who wants this is terrible. It's not, hit you over the head like, this is a bad idea. Why would anybody want it? They explain why it happened and how, and you can relate to almost everybody in it.
Yeah, it's not condescending. Mark Russell, I like him, but I also like Bill Maher, and they have one thing in common. They're both condescending. This doesn't feel condescending.
No, not at all.
One thing I wanted to talk about before we shift over to the movie. One of the things I like about this book also is how it handles the opposing point of view.
Mm-hmm.
So you have as a point of a hurdle something for our characters to deal with, is a sect of humanity led by, I can't remember what the character's name is, but he's
The prophet is what he goes by.
Yeah, is this group going, hey, we've lost sight of our humanity here. We've given up our humanity in this Faustian bargain, for self-confidence and all of the great benefits of surrogacy. We've traded away our humanity. We've traded away our connection to each other. Which, if that is not a profound and prescient commentary on the very now we're living in, I don't know what is.
Oh yeah.
But he's saying like we so these are the back to the cave people. So it's like there's this level of thing in everything that we're doing. The banks are destroying the world. We should go back to like trading and bartering. The environment, the global warming is cooking us all. We should go back to living in caves, and this just goes on and on. They are the extreme, the other side, and I like the way Robert Venditti sort of presented them as: we reject the surrogate life, we reject robots. This is a robot-free zone, and just leave us alone. This is kind of like the mutants on Genosha. Just leave us alone to live our lives separate from the rest of you. We accept the fact that we can't change the rest of the world, but we'd like to live in a place of isolation, and we demand the right to do so. And it's introduced, one, because this book needs an opposing point of view, but two, to give the lead detective a place to go to talk to people to solve the crime. But I like the way Robert Venditti presented it, and I'll give you the last word on this, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, I thought that they did a pretty good job with that. Heck, I was even impressed that the prophet seemed to be quoting scripture accurately until we get to issue 4 and he starts comparing himself to Jesus. I'm like, okay, dude, come on. You have a
Why did that bother you, Evan?
Because he's not Jesus.
Oh.
I mean, the Bible says, Jesus was God himself and didn't consider equality with God something to be grasped. So who are we to set ourselves up that high?
Nicely said. Anyway,
but,
I interrupted you.
No, that was it. But yeah, no, I liked it. And, it also reflects things that I see today, even not with the technological questions with, okay, I see where the dreads, they were called. I see where they're coming from, and yet their leader and some of them are kind of shady too. And it's like, okay, well, I want to agree with you, but I don't really like the way you go about things.
We could spend hours. I could spend hours talking about the ins and outs, the ups and downs, the evils and goods of, for lack of a better phrase, avatar technology, online technology. I've often joked that the day I can upload my consciousness into a robot body, I will leave this saggy fat bag of flesh behind so fast.
but Bruce Willis would miss you, Mark.
Sure. So, but that is as much as I could talk about this for hours, and I have a TikTok for that sort of thing. So I will leave the discussion of the book there. Is there anything else you wanted to discuss with the book?
The only thing I wanted to touch on, I did think it was interesting, as much as this isn't a superhero type book, that I don't know if he just decided this was the best way to do it, or did it to try to appeal to some of the more mainstream comic book readers. But the villain in this, he gets the name Steeplejack. He's a super villain for all intents and purposes, and they didn't do anything with that in the movie. And then I remember, because I remembered almost nothing about the movie, even though I had seen it a long time ago. But I thought it was interesting in the third issue when they try to catch Steeplejack, and he is swinging over a helicopter and loses an arm and just keeps going. And I'm like, I thought this guy was anti-surrogate, but here he is using the surrogate technology, which is, an interesting thing. Like the people who, proclaim their appreciation of the sanctity of life by blowing up abortion clinics. Wait, what? That's not that's not how that works, guys.
That's really
funny.
So
I thought that was interesting. Maybe I should have seen that coming, but I thought that was the guy who is, and there was a good reason for him to be using a surrogate, but the guy who is the most radically anti-surrogate person out there, he's not on the Dread Reservation keeping to himself. and expressing his beliefs. He's trying to shut the whole thing down, and he's using a surrogate to do it.
Well, it's so funny because there's always that one guy, right? There's the group of people that are just like, let us live in peace. There's everybody else willing to run with the new technology, the new toys, the jingling keys, and they kind of agree to a separate but equal existence. Then there's always that one guy that's not willing to live with the peace. There's always, but but he's always a hypocrite. You know what I mean? The idea of this thing that I'm against, it will be the very thing I will use to, and sometimes it's as a form of gaslighting and manipulation. Like we want to make this look bad, so I'm using it to make it look bad so I can turn public tide against it. And sometimes it's just, I see the usefulness of it and I'll use it, but I'll use it to destroy it. It's the old CM Punk thing of you can't fight from the outside, you have to fight from within. That idea. So I didn't question it. I thought like this makes sense to me. This all tracks. What do you think of the artwork? Just as a quick aside.
I actually meant to ask you that because I know what a big fan of Sam Keith you are. It's artwork that I would not be my choice. Like if I'm reading the Avengers or certain things, and it's not even like if I was an editor putting this together, I wouldn't be like, hey, we need some kind of like, surreal painted stuff that, isn't cartoony, but definitely isn't hyper realistic. That's what we need to tell this story. I'm not a very good art critic, but I can say that it worked. It worked with the mood and the tone and everything, even though if somebody gave me the script of this and who do you think we should get to draw this? How should it look? I would never have picked that.
I tend to like art the same way that I like storytelling. I like linear storytelling and I like clean art because the most important thing for me is to understand what it is I'm reading and seeing and watching. Seeing and watching, two different things. But I moderate that with my understanding of style. And sometimes I have to sacrifice a little bit of coherency for style. And I think this sort of scratchy art style is better than Sam Keith, but also works well for this book. I think had it been clean and pristine artwork and it was overly coherent, it would have taken away from the noir aspect of the book, because this kind of gave me some like Batman vibes. Like there are some Batman books where the art is very scratchy.
Rough, I guess is the term I would have used in both the appearance and the feel it gives you. It really suits the tone very well, and it's not a realistic art style, but it makes it feel a little more real. I guess I don't know if I'm articulating that well, but I don't know. It feels kind of imperfect and human.